hopefully we're going to make it through chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7 tonight. So it's going to be a struggle. We'll break a few times and shake it off a bit. I'll go as fast as I can without becoming confusing on some of the slides. And we'll certainly have to slow down for some of the stuff that I'm not as familiar with, like the chapter 7 is buses. So I might end up reading a little bit out of the class plan for that chapter, just so that you guys can get all the information that's available. And again, I want to recognize that there is probably a fair amount of experience in the room. If you're in the room in Tabor, it might be a little difficult, but certainly if there is a formula for doing it, feel free to ask questions. We can ask and answer. If you feel like I've missed something, then by all means chime in for a teaching opportunity. Okay, so having said that, we'll start. We're on chapter 4, first slide of the presentation here. So we're going to start out. Chapter 4 is PPE, and we're going to run through some tools and stuff. So to begin with, I want you to notice that NFPA standard, 1971. Everybody knows that you got to remember 4 or 5 of these things because they always come up on the exams. So NFPA 1971 is for PPE. It covers all PPE. Well, maybe not all PPE. NFPA 1981 covers SCBA. So we'll go through that as well. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these things. We all, our departments all have our departments all have standard operating procedures for this. We all have standard PPE, which would be a full set of bunker gear. As far as gloves are concerned, I know that's a little bit different and changes for departments, so you're going to follow your procedures. Our personal procedures in the Vegreville Fire Department, our firefighters all have wildland firefighting gloves, NFPA structured fire gloves, and some of them are awarded extrication gloves. These gloves have to be used in the form that they are designed for, so you can't use your extrication gloves in a structure fire. If that's seen by the ISO or the safety officer, you'll be reprimanded on scene, probably, and off. So you need to recognize that the PPE is there to protect you, and is usually designed for one purpose. Having said that, keep scrolling, Chris, please. Having said that, when we talk about PPE, what we'd like you to think about is that PPEs are meant. PPE is meant as a hazard control. We can control hazards through administrative controls. We can control them through engineering controls. So administrative controls, don't do that, you might get hurt. Engineered controls would be something like putting a guard over a belt and pulley so that you couldn't stick your finger in there. Would be a good engineering control. And PPE is essentially a last line of defense for when those controls cannot be managed in any other form, right? So I would like for everybody to recognize that when you are wearing PPE, you're already at risk. Just so you're aware of those things. Okay, so one thing that we do not, we are issued ear protection, and we have filters, P100s, for use when we're breaking glass and when we're working with power tools. They're available downstairs. So when we're working on stuff like that this weekend, we will have access to earplugs and P100 masks. So here we've hit the SCBA standard for NFPA is 1981. Another number to write down and remember. Keep scrolling, Chris, please. So this is going to go. These slides are going through inhalation protection. We have the best form is essentially not needing them at all. If we have SCBA, everybody understands self-contained breathing apparatus. SAVA, which would be the same thing, except it's a supplied air breathing apparatus, usually with a hose. Same mask and connection. It's just a long hose back to the tank, so the tank is out of the hot zone. And then we have stuff like these APRs, which get a little tricky because one, there's a significant limitations to these. Some of them being that obviously you can't put oxygen in your air, right? So if whatever the circumstance is in the atmosphere is reducing air or reducing oxygen, then these are not appropriate, right? So they can filter out a lot of things if you're using the appropriate filter, which is can be fairly tricky and usually takes some pre-study. Okay, we'll keep moving. Technical rescue crews. So again, we'd like you to recognize that these things are out there. Class A, the left-hand side looks like a Class A suit, which is full chemical protection. Class B would be a step down from there. C, and essentially a Class D suit would be your coveralls, your wildland firefighting coveralls, essentially. Is there any questions? Okay, we'll keep moving. Okay, so now we're just going to run through some of the response vehicles, and again, I'm going to do this as quick as possible because
I don't want to get ahead of you on the phone.
Yeah, go ahead. So we have all sorts of different sizes and types of vehicles designed for many different things, and we all recognize that. We all have them in our departments. I suppose that one of the biggest things would be that you need to familiarize yourself with the equipment that your department has, how to use it, and how to be safe with it.
I don't look too bad.
Are there any questions on vehicles and vehicle types as far as response vehicles? We're going to get into a lot of different vehicles for extrication and stuff like that. Okay, here we go. The danger zones associated with vehicle-mounted winch. This is something we should understand. Anybody know what that length is?
whatever you're attached to.
Yeah. So is the cable always going to break in the center of the cable? No, probably not. Right? It'll probably be break right close to the hook. So yeah, the whole length of that cable is what would be the danger zone, the diameter of the danger zone. This is just more specialized equipment that fire departments have chosen to put on their vehicles. Usually, it's a lot environment depending. Like if you're had really steep embankments for your roads and stuff, you might want certain things. Air supply systems. Everybody should be fairly comfortable with these things. The cascade system is usually 4 to 6 large tanks that you can fill multiple 2216 tanks or whatever they are, the 44 tanks. You can fill many of them by cascading that system. So your first tank, as your first tank gets lower, you always fill your tank as full as it will go off the first large tank, and then move it up to the second large tank to fill that up as full as the second large tank will fill it. And that's how you get the most out of your 4 large tanks of air. You can end up filling many more than if you just filled all of your SCBA pack tanks up straight up, because then you'd end up with 4 tanks that were down below 2216. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's why it's referred to as a cascade system. And then, of course, we have the generators. Usually we have generators to fill up those cascade systems. Again, everybody should be comfortable with these things on each truck in their department. How to set up turn on the generator if it's required, and set up your light system. Okay, so wooden cribbing, plastic cribbing, not a whole lot of difference. I've heard some complaints about each. I think I've heard some complaints that plastic cribbing can become slippery when it's wet, but I've never experienced that myself. I'm sure both work. This box crib is a standard for creating tall cribbing for stabilization, and that's how we would like to see it done. So two blocks separated by an equal distance, and then perpendicular blocks placed on top, and that's how you'll build your cribbing. And then, of course, right at the end, you might need a little wedge or something just to snug it up and tension it up, right? Lots of people have lots of different thoughts on those step chocks. Again, go with what your officers and what your department chooses. A lot of people like them. They can be very quick in certain circumstances. You can flip them upside down and they'll hold onto grass. The steps will hold into grass and they'll just be an angle. So they do have. Again, just like anything, they would have positives and negatives associated. Onto struts. So struts can be thought of as a more complex form of stabilization. They're definitely come in handy in a lot of circumstances. Usually abnormal. So usually you wouldn't need struts for a car on its wheels. But certainly on its side or on its roof, those struts come in handy, right? And we'll experience those this weekend. So yeah, so other types of equipment are used depending on the operation. So we'll go through a bunch. We have a lot in the slides. Using chains, we have safety chains. So we have chains that hook into all sorts of stuff. We have chains on struts and stuff like that as well. So kind of speaks for itself. A Halligan or pry bar works pretty well in the right circumstances. There are a few things that, yeah, well, we'll get to those maybe a little later, but specialized hand tools, actually specialized tools just in general, you have to make sure that you're using them for what they were designed for, otherwise your outcomes will maybe not what you're looking for. You can end up breaking the tool, or it's just not going to work for you. So we have come-alongs, we have jacks, we have all sorts of stuff. We have winches, that kind of thing, and we can use them to give us stabilization. We can pull things, move things, make things safe with them, right? As long as we're using them correctly. Airbags, again, that's something that we will touch on. We'll touch on that this weekend, and we'll have some out and show you how to use them and when best to use them. Again, one of our laws for extrication is going to be lift an inch, crib an inch, right? And that goes especially well with these airbags. If you lift an inch with an airbag, you crib that inch just in case you lose that compression, right? And that would also be considered a fairly complex situation. So yeah, the hydraulic, the cutters and the spreaders, these are considered our gravy tools, you know. But in the event that our access, we can't have access, the vehicle doesn't have close access, or we run out of batteries, or whatever the case may be, we may always have to fall back on the tools that have been used before spreaders and cutters were there. So you know, you could be out in the middle of a field with a hacksaw, you know, and that would work, right? It would take a long time, but it would work. So just a word on these hydraulic tools. They have a lot of power associated with them, and that power, that energy, is also dangerous to us and our patients. So this course will go over the safe use of these. So we expect that a firefighter is always keeps their body is never between the tool and the vehicle. So you always have to rearrange the way that you're cutting or spreading so that you're safe. You have to ensure that your patients are safe, always, always, always. And if there's hydraulic lines, you're not stepping on lines or anything like that. So again, here, what these slides are getting at is that all of these tools, they all have a use, but they all also can be dangerous. So we want you to get used to them. We want you to be safe with them. We want you to be safe with your team, and we want you to be safe with your patient. We personally, I've never seen our department use thermal cutting devices for anything. Have you guys ever used them? there's a fair amount of, again, a fair amount of dangers associated with that, right? So. Come along, block and tackle for moving vehicles. Actually, I will also be able to show you a really cool move for the spreaders with just a shovel. Put a shovel under one tire, and you can just slide that vehicle with the spreaders. Okay, is there any questions for chapter 4? Congratulations, you made it through the first one. So we'll just set up, give us a minute, we'll shake it off and be back in fairly soon here if you want to just grab a drink or something. Otherwise, we'll start as quick as Chris already has the.
Move this microphone. It's still recording, so you guys know it's still recording. I'm just gonna move this a little closer because when you stop talking and then start talking, there's a very definite break in the sound. So I might just move this a little closer. Are you doing the rest of it from here?
No, I'll probably stand there.
All right, I'm just gonna move Phil's microphone a little closer. I'm sorry for everyone out there who might get a lot of sound on the microphone. Oh, we might not be able to. Just want to check his settings. Manuel, can you put on those earbuds and just see if you can still hear me? Can you still hear me okay, Manuel? Good, excellent. Thanks, James. James heard you. We won't tolerate static remark, Cody. He heard that. That was good. All right, so that microphone actually might be a little better. So we get 10 minutes?
Sure. Absolutely.
5 minutes. There's 50 slides on this one.
2 slides.
2 seconds.
This is actually one of the funnest chapters.
Is that
the bus one, not so.
Everyone else is here. Let's just get started.
Okay. Okay, so we'll start chapter 5. We'll move on. Extrication techniques and some other interesting learnings.
I'll have to say next slide so I know when you actually want to change.
Okay. So this is actually fairly important. So these 3 control zones, this actually happens at every incident, whether you know it or not. Your incident commander probably has planned these out, and they're always of different sizes, so different proportions depending on the incident. But certainly in extrication, there would be the hot zone would be immediately around the vehicle and should remain clear of unnecessary tools, equipment, vehicle components, and personnel. So if you're not there for a reason, you probably shouldn't be there. Certainly if you cut pieces of something off of the vehicle, when they get placed away from the scene, they wouldn't be placed in the hot zone, they would be placed at least in the warm zone. That makes sense, right? So the warm zone would be limited access. It would serve as a functional space for those in support of the extrication operation. It should contain tools and equipment like a staging area, our tarps for our tools, etc. It could contain personnel staging. So yeah, if you finished your job and your officer knows that you are there waiting, then that would be a good place to stay until you're given another job. And the cold zone would be considered support. So it's the location of the incident command and related functions like logistics, operations planning, or whatever the case may be. It would include a crowd control line. So that's where we would stop people. Whether or not you have to establish a waiting zone for people that have reason to be concerned with the incident, or media or anything like that, that can be established in the cold zone, right? Okay, we'll move on. So why do we stabilize? So stabilization is always the first thing that never mind. Stabilization is one of the first things that happens on scene. Of course, the first thing that happens on scene is a hazard assessment and a 360 walk around by your incident commander. But stabilization needs to happen before we can access patients. We need to make sure it's part of controlling our hazards, right? Stabilization. It's necessary to prevent further injury to patients, possible injury to rescue personnel, further degradation of the vehicle's structural integrity, however that may be. So when we do stabilization, we also need to recognize. So say we get, however your departments do it, like I've been trained and I've seen some departments really like pulling tire stubs, and I don't like doing it personally. I would prefer to have a real nice, slow, controlled lift and a slide of chalk underneath something to get a stable car. Less movement for the patient inside, less unplanned movement, but other departments may not agree, and if that's how your department is, then that's great. What we need to recognize is that changing the circumstance on that vehicle, or say if we were lightening that vehicle by removing doors or trunks or personnel, patients, or a roof, you need to recognize that that's changed the weight of the car, and we may need to reassess our stabilization. Maybe more cribbing is necessary because the vehicle has become lighter, right? So how do we do this? How do we stabilize? It's probably different in every circumstance. There are probably some very common circumstances, right? You could chalk the wheels of a vehicle that's on its wheels in the ditch. That should be enough, right? If you feel like you need to you're going to work on this, maybe the vehicle's really mangled, and you need to make sure that it's not going to move anywhere, it's on a slope, then further stabilization, maybe anchoring even, might be necessary to stabilize the vehicle and remove energy, remove potential energy. So for upright vehicles, would be the most common movement would be whichever way the tires are facing, right? Backward on the wheels, or if the wheels are turning. You can chalk the wheels, cribbing, other suitable objects. You can chalk on downhill sides if it's on a slope. Again, you can. A really good way to stop a vehicle from moving is to put the parking brake on, put it in park, turn the key off. That's going to help for future workings. So yeah, and try before you pry, right? So you maybe don't have to do things from the outside if you can do them from the inside. So all sorts of stuff like automatic transmissions, manual transmissions, whether or not you're deflating the tires, like I previously said. So really all we're trying to do is prevent vehicle movement for when we're going to be working on the vehicle. So step chocks, cribbing, jacks, winches, struts, pneumatic airbags could be used for stabilization. I think generally they would be used for movement so that extrication could happen more likely. But so here we'd like to say that when you are doing the stack cribbing or any cribbing, we want you to be doing it safely. So we don't want you sticking your hands in anywhere where they could be pinched or be in danger. So you can get really quick at this by you throw a 4x4 block on the ground and you push it in with another block, right? And that's just keeping your hands out of danger, right? So common cribbing techniques, Chris has up on the slides now. The 4-point support, 6-point support. You can do all compass points of the vehicle. Also, the type of vehicle will have an effect on this. A lot of unibody construction can be quite weak once it's been in a collision. So you may need more cribbing than you thought you needed because the frame might be bendy. So that would be something that you would just have to stop your procedures and go back and crib again. So vehicles on its side. So definitely some things to think about with this. Struts work very good for this circumstance, and depending on the circumstance, this can still be a fairly stable vehicle. Usually on snow, not really at all. Still very, very movable. So we want to be cautious about the vehicle being on its side. We want to be cautious about gas leaks, fuel leaks, hot exhaust. There could be a significant fire danger. So keep that in mind. There should be at least one 38 mil charge line ready on these. The occupants can escape through open doors. They could be pinched underneath. We've done a fair amount of for the vehicle on its side. We've taken roofs and rolled them down so that we can access the whole passenger compartment. Or you can come in the back side, at the back window if it's nice and tall. It depends on the vehicle. So a vehicle on its roof, again, you want to, usually what we would want to do is have struts on the outward angles and have cribbing on the perpendicular plane, if that makes sense. I don't know if you guys can see this, but say our vehicle is here. We could have the struts on each side going out, bracing sideways, right? And then here we can crib this side of the vehicle from moving this way. So then you've protected it from moving in 3 directions, which is quite stable usually. One thing with a vehicle on its side or on its roof, a lot of times, we like to use our posts, A post, B post, C posts. Those are a lot of times, I know we cut through them a lot, but really they are some of the most stable parts of the vehicle, right? Some of the strongest parts of the vehicle. So they're also good positions to find purchase points in for struts, and also good for stabilization, cribbing, and stuff like that, if that makes sense. Usually these positions, upside down inside on their side, we'd like to extricate those patients quickly because they're usually very uncomfortable, right? So if you can get in there quick and extricate a patient, get them onto a spine board as soon as you can cut the seat belt, et cetera, right? You're ahead of the game. Other positions of vehicles. So this is where it gets inventive. We'll try and do we'll try and throw some curveballs at you this weekend. Certainly, we've seen all sorts of stuff. The 9-vehicle collision on the highway where there was boats on top of trucks, on top of cars, and you need to stabilize all that stuff if you have to extricate from there, right? You can't leave energy available for movement and stuff like that. So one of those things that we could do for vehicles in other positions is just like that, married to each other or stabilize them. We can tie them together, and that way we know that they're not going to move freely on a wheel. Especially when a rescuer gets into one, a different weight gets put on them, right? Is there any questions there? Okay. We'll move on to objective 3, lifting. Really what we want to do is we want everything to happen because we want it to happen. We don't want to have anything unexpected happen. So we don't want any slips, we don't want any slides, nothing unforeseen. So if we do need to remove a vehicle or lift a vehicle off another vehicle to access a patient, we need to do that in such a way that there is very minimal risk of anything happening unintentionally. That makes sense, right? And that's one of the best parts about this extrication is that there's never a real clear, well, there might be a clear right way, but it's going to be different every time. So what we want to do is we want to have something you can always get together with the officers, your experienced people, have a little huddle, come up with 3 plans. 1, 2, 3, and label them that way, right? So that if one doesn't work, you can easily slide into your plan B, right? Because that happens, right? So lifting, so again, however you do this, it needs to be done in the most controlled way possible. This may require the object to be cut in half. We can do that. We can cut things into pieces and take pieces off. We can move with winches. We can lift an inch. We can crib an inch. Right? That highly reduces any danger of unforeseen movement. So using airbags. So I guess it makes sense that we should protect them from puncture. Again, lift an inch, crib an inch. These bags never, they're not rectangular. They never lift straight. So you have to be very careful of movement, like gyroscopic movement. So you can have all sorts of movement when you're lifting. So again, lift an inch, crib an inch. High pressure airbags. Using jacks. So we don't actually have any jacks anymore, but certainly I could see a use for them. We did have a jackal that seconded as a strut. It was a very good strut. Now since been replaced, but these jacks would be the exact same thing as these airbags. You want to lift an inch, crib an inch. You want to make sure that any rotational movement or movement side to side has been controlled. Using levers. So I'm sure fire halls have been doing all sorts of this for a very, very long time. These are simple machines, levers, beautiful thing. As long as you're in understanding and you know what the outcome of your procedures are going to be. Okay, so chains, wire rope, synthetic slings, and hitches. So of course we would use all of these things. Any of these can work as long as you. Next slide, please. As long as you have tried them, you know what's going to happen, or somebody does on the scene. Some ups and downs with strapping and stuff. Strapping can be cut. Chains, they don't have any give. They do a fair amount of damage to whatever they're pulling on. I don't know. I guess we can go through chains most chains having tie-down chains having a slip hook and a grabbing hook. That is we'll use these this weekend, and hopefully you have seen them and have used them on your department as well. Wire rope. I call this next slide, please. This wire rope is there we go. Sorry, I call this aircraft wire, and I honestly didn't really know that there was 3 different types. But here we go. There's braided wire rope, which is formed by plating component wire ropes. Cable laid rope, which is composed of 6 wire ropes wrapped around fiber or wire rope cord. And strand laid rope, made with strands wrapped around a fiber core, wire strand core, or independent wire rope core. Anybody know what the winch ones are? Be a cable laid rope. Sounds right. The fittings of these is actually fairly the hooks that you see there are both look like slip hooks. So if that was a chain, they would go around the chain and slide on the chain. So it would be like using a slip knot. Otherwise, there's a grabbing hook that catches in the links, right? The rest of these eyes and things, we just maybe need to recognize that they would not go directly onto anything, so they would have to be attached via a chain maybe or something like that, right? Or have a hook on them themselves. right? Okay, so important things to note for these aircraft cables and wire ropes. Obviously, you need to make sure that it's in operable capacity. So if you see pinches, if there's actual pieces that are coming off, and when you're putting it back on the winch, it makes you bleed all the time, then probably time to replace that or write up a deficiency report, right? Synthetic slings. So these would be tie-down straps, and now they're slings. Maybe not tie-down straps, but we're getting close. This might be something like webbing or something, and it would have an attachment point for a winch hook or something like that, and they can do excellent jobs in the right use. So with synthetic slings, there's a few things to note. You need to destroy anything that is damaged or defective, and it can become that way from melting due to friction, or abrasion, or literally being cut on an edge or something. You don't shorten them with knots, bolts, or other makeshift devices. Make sure legs are not kinked or twisted. Obviously, don't load in excess of rated capacity. This is actually fairly interesting. Make sure to balance loads in a basket hitch to prevent slippage. I had previously been taught when doing an anchor point to wrap 3 and pull 2. That's no longer the safest way to do it. A basket hitch is the best way to do it. So you take that same webbing and you just make a loop of that webbing. So you have a water knot in your webbing, or if this, whatever this case might have been. So you just have a loop, and then you just loop that loop around your anchor, and you have an anchor point for your carabiner, right? A downside is that it won't hold on to that anchor. If your anchor is a tree, it'll fall to the bottom of the tree. But that basket hitch is free to move with the load, which makes it a safer anchor. Some other stuff. So these slings, treat them like rope, right? You don't step on them. You don't drive dust into them. You don't drop them in a rusty old tank or something, and then think that they're gonna be fine for the next emergency. So we'll go on to some hitches. A little more, Chris. Oh no, maybe you're ahead of me. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. So some forms that you can see. Probably we come across that. So we'll keep moving. Is there any questions about that? No? Okay. Pretty basic stuff, but certainly feel free to ask anything. We can open it up. So we'll move on to glass. So laminated glass versus non-laminated glass. Of course, you have the shatter, right? So currently, up until 2017, I mean, laminated glass was only been seen in windshields. So, and that's why we have the Glass Acts some glass cutters. Some departments probably use a reciprocating saw to pull that windshield off, right? Either way, whenever you're cutting glass or breaking glass, the dust that is created from that is super unhealthy. So during this course, we'll be having a P100 mask to wear when we're braking, and we'll be ensuring that nobody is downwind when we brake, if we brake. So it's standard protocol to call out breaking glass before you do so, and we'll just add those extra things on. So I don't know about everybody else, but I have in the top of my helmet, I have a couple P100 masks for myself, as well as I usually have ears in my bunker gear, which is a good practice for all firefighters, I'm sure. So back to breaking glass, laminated glass. If it's not laminated, we can use a glass punch, and it'll just shatter, right? So of course, if we have a patient in the vehicle, we want to make sure that that patient's covered and protected from breaking glass. That goes without saying. We can use crazy carpets for that. We can use blankets for that. Many different things work. In fact, I like the crazy carpet thing. Cut in half. They're really quite nice for patient protection. Like even in the front seat, if you're using a ram and you're doing a dash roll, you can put that crazy carpet between the ram and your patient's leg or hip, and no, you're not worried about pinching or anything like that, right? It's a nice warm fuzzy for everybody involved. Okay, so glass. So in 2017, the motor vehicle standard has changed. I forget what the motor vehicle standard is, but of course, every year to make vehicles safer, they are trying to push vehicle manufacturers to create safer vehicles. One of those things in 2017 has changed so that side windows, I'm rolling it up, you don't do that anymore, now you just press the button. Side windows are now going to be laminated glass. So that can pose issues for us. But again, we just need to find out what our procedures should be. So a really good way to get around that is all you're going to do is you're going to cut the base of the window, like of the front passenger window. You'll just go in and cut across the base, all the way across the base. Put your hands in there and pull the window out and down, and your window's out. Does that make sense? Right? Know that these changes are happening all the time. Another change that is happening is that B-posts are becoming very, very, very strong. They're becoming strong in multiple ways, some of which can endanger our tools because they can be high strength steels and stuff like that maybe our tools aren't rated for. They can also be, I think the cheaper version other than the high strength steel is multiple layers that your cutters may have to get through. So those B-posts are becoming stronger for T-bones, right? For side impact collisions. So what we're finding now is if you want to take a B-post to do a third door, or take a patient out more directly out the back, you can drop the back seat if you take the B-post out. So what we would do then is we would cut into the roof in a V-shaped pattern from the B-post. So this is our window, our B-post, something like that. You can have a steering wheel here. See? I won't draw, man. Or I won't. So all we would do is take our cutters and cut into the roof, because the roof doesn't have that high strength steel in it, right? So we cut a V pattern into the roof. We cut the base of the B post maybe, if we can. or if we cut this off, then we can fold the B post down, right? Then you're not going through any of that high strength steel, and Bob's your uncle, right? Same effect. Now it's just 2 cuts instead of 1 cut. So like that previous photo, you can tape off the glass if that's what your protocols are. It's certainly great. I feel like it takes a lot of time, but your patient might really appreciate it. Any questions on glass? Okay, so again, it really helps to stay up to date on some of this stuff. I have some videos and stuff that we'll show you. We're not prepared to show you them tonight, but we have some videos and some fun things, and taking a look at an old F-150 pile up in a head-on impact test. It's pretty eye-opening. So we'll take some looks at some of that stuff during some of the future classes. So door side panel removal. This is one of our basics. Of course, everybody knows that before we're going to try to take anything off, we're going to try to open the door, because it might open. Like, you can have the whole outside, the exterior of the door ripped off, and it can still open. It can happen. So just try before you pry.
What's fun in that then?
Yeah, well, the fun is being super successful and that your patient believes that
You don't have any angry patients.
you're a professional and you've done the best things that you could do for that patient. So another thing I want to drive home, the try before you pry is a standard for extrication, right? So we'll put that big letters. Also, exposed to metal now. So another thing that's been happening is that vehicles are all in becoming safer. They've also put a lot more airbags in them, and I'm sure we're going to get to airbags sooner or later. But here, when we start to remove things, you need to expose to metal, especially if you're going to pull anything off or cut anything. You have to expose. So the B posts, if you're going to make this cut, you want to make sure that you look on all sides of that B post. You're looking for airbag signs, which can be very, very vague. But you're looking for signs of airbags. The cylinders that are associated with these airbags are close to the airbags, so they can be in these roof lines, like up adjacent to the doors, like right very close into the doors. They can be in these posts, depending, and those cylinders are high pressure cylinders, right? So you don't want to put cutters through them. It'll be a change of pants for you and your patient. So exposed to metal, a good rule, good law. So there's multiple ways that we can do this. Everybody kind of does it a different way. The best way is the fastest way. The best way is the way that works for you, right? So if you want to go for the nadir pin, and it may be depending on the damage that's done to the door, you can go for the nadir pin, or you can go for the hinges, whatever's easiest, right? Depends on the. Usually the hinges I would think would be stronger than a nadir pin, but a nadir pin seems to have fairly good hole. But another trick with pulling the nadir pin is actually some pros from the Calgary Fire Department. A little secret they have. They carry not a squash ball, but a racket ball. carry a racquetball in their bunker gear, and they use the racquetballs to hold the door handle up, right? So that the nadir pin is unlocked, or if that cable still works, right? But it might make things easier for you, right? So creating purchase points. If you can to get access to those hinges, you can just take your spreaders and squish the front panel, and it opens up room to take a look at and see the hinges, or at least gives you a purchase point to open that up further, right? Does that make sense? Another way you could do it is take your spreaders and squish the door vertically. Put your spreaders over top of the door and squish it, and it'll open up the edges of the door so you can see the nadir pin or the hinges, right? Does that make sense? These things are it'll be much clearer when we can actually do this kind of stuff, right? But just know you need to create purchase points for your spreaders. You can't just make something out of nothing, right? A Halligan tool does a very good job for doing that stuff too, right? One thing that we always want to do when we're removing these things is we want to reduce movement or shaking or jarring of the patient. So if we know that that hinge is going to pop right away, you can release that. You just stop your spreaders from opening, and you can just say, ma'am, this is going to pop. It's okay. We're doing this on purpose, and this is going to get you out. Communication with your patient, right? Hopefully your patient attendant can do that stuff while you're working. Okay, so we'll keep moving to the third and fourth doors. That would be the same thing. You got hinges on both of those, so it would be you go after hinges to pop. Further to that, the next slide would be total sidewall removal. And that one, looks like they've taken a B-post. So they cut the B-post?
Yeah.
I don't know how they could cut the front part of the B-post.
No, I think they opened the back door, and then they just cut it. B-post to the bottom and top, and then the whole thing. The rear door.
Yeah.
I don't think the post is still open there.
It's got to be.
It is there.
Well,
It's there.
I mean, that's what connects the door, but you gotta have the front door open to cut the inside of the bottom of the B-post.
So this total is a method for gaining access to patients. It provides wide access way to perform extrication and disentanglement, and also, one of the common ways that we extricate patients from a front driver's side would be the hip spin, right? So you slide the spine board under the driver, and then you using C-spine and spinal mobilization devices, if necessary, you can slide the hips so that they're facing into the vehicle, and then lay them down onto the spine board that firefighters are holding, right? So depending on the vehicle, depending on patient injuries, maybe if we took the whole sidewall out and then we lowered the seat so that the seat was in a fully reclined position, we could slide a spine board underneath that patient, and there would be maybe less movement, right? And maybe it would be better for the patient to do that. So this third door conversion, this next one, is the same idea. Essentially, all you're doing is working for more. Working for more room to pull a patient out without spinning them. So a third door conversion would be a single door vehicle, and you cut through the B post, which is essentially the last post, right? Because it's a two door. You cut through that to the rear window at the top, and then at the bottom you cut right into the back wheel well, and you can remove that piece. Gives you lots more room. Does that make sense? Kick panel removal, the next slide. So this would be entanglement of feet and pedals and stuff like that. You can use, you're essentially cutting the floor up. Use shears to cut through the A-post at the base. Make a relief cut at the dashboard level. Use an air chisel or reciprocating saw to cut the skin of the kick panel from the base of the A-post forward to the wheel well. And then you can pry off essentially the floor, right? Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Okay, roof removal. So, unibody construction, yeah, of course, there's all sorts of years out there of different years of vehicles, right? With different airbag types, with different structural stuff, all sorts of crazy stuff out there. So, roof removal can compromise the integrity of the vehicle, right? So this is where I was saying, if you're pulling posts and your vehicle starts sagging in the center, you might have to stop and go and crib that vehicle a little better, right? Because it's folding. So this is actually saying here that you can remove the roof without removing the posts. So you could leave the structural integrity of the vehicle just like that, right? So you've cut the roof, you've gained access to the patients, but you haven't removed the strength of the vehicle. Flapping the roof. So this flapping of the roof. Okay, I was looking at that wrong. It looks like just like that though.
Yep.
So this is you can a vehicle on its side. We just cut the posts and just fold the roof down, right? The next slide shows it fairly well too. So that one, they took the posts. So jacking or lifting a steering column and dashboard. We kind of, so this isn't quite a dash roll yet, actually. So this is just a pull. So you can do this in multiple ways. You can do this emergency quick. With your spreaders, if you stick your spreaders, you open your spreaders up real wide and you catch the outside of the A-post and the inside of the steering wheel. You can pull that steering wheel up and away, but you have to be very, very careful that your steering wheel doesn't slip out of your spreaders. It happens quite frequently if your angles are not perfect, right? So that's one way to do it very, very quickly. There's probably your department has many different ways to do this. There's another really good way to do it is to have a very strong post, like a 6x6 post, that you can put either across the A posts or from the roof to the hood, and then you can wrap a chain around the post and the steering wheel. Slide your spreaders under the post and under the over on the post, under the chain, and lift the chain. Does that make sense? I know it's terrible, right?
No,
How do I describe these things? There's also specialized equipment for this. So that looks like a J-hook that is somehow being purchased and pulled on. Whether or not you have to be careful that because your patient is still there, right? So the post thing with the spreaders is nice because there's really good control of energy, and it seems to happen very nicely. But just know that is an option. If your steering wheel is what is entrapping something, that was three ways of doing that. So a dash roll. Might try to draw this one because this was meant to be the front of the vehicle. Second. Ooh, man.
It looks like the 2018 Ford.
What is that?
That's Ford. 2018 Ford.
Okay, so with a dash roll, you got here. Let's make a little seat here. What you're doing? Usually, you have either entrapment of legs and pedals, or the steering wheel and steering column have come forward. So what we would want to do is we want to cut in with the cutters. We usually make a cut right here to loosen that up. We don't make a cut on the top, right? We just make that cut there. And we have a metal purchase point that we place on the rail along the base of the door, and then we put a ram, and we ram this up and away. After this cut, you can do this cut on the other side as well. I think I'm missing a. Yeah, we'll go through this. I'm pretty sure. So we use our ram against this side of the door, the door frame, and we push away from the patient and up, and the ram usually works very well, especially when you have this weakened frame here. And it should give you, if your ram moves 8 inches. Usually it'll when you begin to retract, it'll come back 3, but that gave you 5 inches of movement, right? So it's pretty good.
But you have to cut the A-post in the bottom, right? To make it weak.
Here?
Right? No, to the bottom.
At the bottom right there makes it really nice. Because if you don't do that, it'll still move things, but they'll come back further and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So it's much nicer if you make that cut in there. Yeah. Okay, does that?
I'm trying to find you a black marker because it might show up on the webcam a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
They found out what your training for next year is for your art class. No, it's all good.
I think I actually have a bunch of pictures of that stuff from Hot Shots 2 years ago. So the next one would be a floor. Yeah, there we go. And they've made that cut there too. Perfect. Usually, that's you're working in real close quarters with the patient's legs and stuff and hip when they're sitting. So pretty careful movement. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to a floor pan drop. Thank you.
Something quick, see how it shows up.
Okay.
Try drawing another car.
Here, how about
Oh, make it bigger. See, it's more whiteboard group.
cab truck?
Sure.
I think.
Looks like a Humvee.
That looks like Cody's truck. Looks like.
Yeah. No, it's not that blocky.
Okay, so the floor plan drop.
Marshall, John says that he's got all of Phil's videos there. If there's any certain video you want him to try to link up to everybody, but if, I don't know if you know the videos he's talking about.
Okay, I think for now we'll just pass on it, and I'll come we'll bring all of them to at maybe the end of the weekend class or something. After doing scenarios all day, we can come in and spend a little bit of time.
Okay, yeah, John says no worries. Okay. The black marker does work better, yes.
Okay.
Your skill still needs work, but yeah, your black marker does work. That's from me, by the way.
Okay, so this floor plan drop. So what we've done here is made two cuts, and it looks like they've rammed it out underneath, or even just used a sawzall to cut it out, and then push it away. Okay, next, seat design. So actually, this brings up another point. So a lot of departments, our department has, and I'm sure a lot of other departments have protocols for de-energizing vehicles to protect us from airbags, or in the case of hybrids or other electrical vehicles, of just actual movement and stuff like that. And those are all viable things, but occasionally using you might miss that energy, having those keys. We haven't gotten to airbags yet, but airbags, new age airbags, they are disengaged by the removal of the key, or disengaged by the ignition. Those cylinders obviously are still holding pressure, but those airbags require three things to go off. These new age airbags require three things to go off. They need speed, they need impact, and they need deceleration. And those are all sensors, right? That gauge those things. The analogs are devised for those things. If any one of those three are not there, those airbags don't go off. Having said that, old cars with different airbags probably aren't on that system, and there's always a exception to every rule. Jaguar and Toyota make airbags that are self-contained. So even if we de-energize the vehicle, those airbags could still plausibly be set off. Which is why our rule for airbags is going to always, whether or not we've de-energized the vehicle or how long it's been sitting there for, because we all know, maybe we don't all know, but electrical capacitors can hold energy for a long period of time and can drain over the course of 5 minutes. So there is no clear way that, I don't think there is a clear way that we can always be confident that we have completely mitigated the risks of airbags. So what we want you to do is just always treat vehicles that airbags haven't been released as though they could. Cody?
Also on that, there are such things as stage airbags.
True enough.
The deploy airbag should still be treated as locked.
Yes. Those are usually passenger airbags. Two-stage, dual-stage airbags. Yeah, so, and, again, I'm going to say speed, impact, deceleration. So chances of an airbag going off, even in a second collision, are very, very slim. Just because there was no speed involved in that secondary collision, or whatever the case may be. And actually, I know there's a lot of awareness of it, but actual first responders being injured by airbags is actually quite small. But again, having said that, we're going to treat all airbags and we're going to treat them with care, as though they could go off. So when you don't stick your head, you don't just jump in and stick your head in a vehicle with your helmet on between the wheel and the patient or anything like that, right? That's just something that we'll avoid. Okay, where was I? Seat design. De-energizing a vehicle. Okay, so in this circumstance, you have an electric seat. You have a patient that may be entrapped by the legs. Would it maybe be smart to try and recede the chair, the driver's seat, using power instead of cutting the battery and not having power at all, right? So something to think about, right? You always have to be thinking different circumstances, right? You have to take what you're given and use what you can, right? So most seats are on tracks. Some are just bolted straight in. Either way, they're obviously very, very stable. Sometimes the crash forces can break the teeth of the mechanism so that they either slide freely or don't slide at all. Of course, the tracks could be broken or whatever. They may wedge the driver or passenger under the dashboard. Again, side impact airbags can be in the seats, and they can be disabled by cutting cables between the sensor and the bag. It's risky. I would advise not cutting into cloth if it was me. When you cut, if your seat backs, a lot of times we like to drop that seat back, and you can cut that seat back right off, but you have to be very careful about doing that. Old vehicles that aren't completely electrically operated have springs associated with that, right? So if you cut into those, rip them off with the cutters or whatever, those springs are going to go flying. So this is saying that seat displacement can be obviously spreaders. I've seen professionals use spreaders purchased on the roof of the vehicle and the headrest, and extend and bring that patient down. Not something that I would choose to do. I think there's a lot of energy involved there, but package your patient as dictated by their injuries before moving the seats. So if you know you have C-spine indications, you should be putting on an Oregon spine splint or something like that before the movement of the seat. Does that make sense? You certainly would have somebody on C-spine, right? Or have a collar on, etc., etc. Again here, okay, so you can just take the whole seat, right? You can just cut it right out. That is possible. Cut it off of the tracks. We'd be doing that with cutters. You could accomplish it with Sawzall. I don't know that I would want to pop it with spreaders with the patient on the seat, but I suppose anything's possible. Cutting pedals. If your department has them, you could use a hydraulic pedal cutters for quick access. Exercise caution when using around patients' legs and feet, of course, because they're trapped in there. You can wrap a strap around the pedal and pull on the strap to bring the tension away from where the feet are or the legs are. You can cut high on the pedal arm and remove it so you don't have to remove the shaft, right? Does that make sense? You can use your spreaders to bend the shaft or the pedals out of the way. You can secure those pedal arms by chains or strapping. Any comments or questions? Okay, we're going to move on to coming through the floor. So, can we imagine some issues, safety issues associated with this?
Fuel lines,
Fuel lines definitely go from the engine to the gas tank, right? What else?
electrical, hybrid, like the high voltage for the hybrid cars.
Yeah, a hybrid car, high voltage stuff. Anything else?
Taking away some of the structural integrity, depending on what you cut.
You could take away structural integrity, yeah. Certainly you need to, what are you going to cut? What are you going to take out? You're going to take the whole seat out? Because you could, probably, right?
You want to cut footwell.
Well, it depends on the circumstance, right? But if you're just gaining access, then you could come in the back seats, right? If the gas tank wasn't in the way or whatever the case may be, you could come in the passenger through the passenger side if your driver was the patient, right? Either way, you have to be careful about whether or not your tools can actually do the job. Because if you're going through frame and stuff, you got to be careful about doing that stuff for structural integrity and the strength of your tools. Of course, no cutting torches. So we're going to show two different methods. These are determined by the type of vehicle, number of trapped occupants, locations, and conditions of said occupants. So method 1, mark an area 2 feet by 2 feet over rear footwell and center line. Cut 3 sides of a square using medium to heavy duty air chisel, a reciprocating saw, or a keyhole saw. 1 parallel to the rocker panel or frame, 2 from ends of the first cut towards the center line. Pull or cut away the remaining floor covering. Bend flat towards the cover line. Method 2, used only on unibody vehicles if front passenger seat is unoccupied. Pry bottom of the passenger door away to allow the blade of open shear to be inserted. Cut the rocker panel from near the base of the A post to near the B post. Make sense? Then cuts upward towards center line. Lift and fold flap of floorboard. So you're kind of just separating the exterior of the vehicle from the floorboard, and then you're just cutting in to the shifter, maybe, right? To the center line. Any questions? I've never come across that. That would be interesting to see. Tunneling. This, I believe, we have done. May be necessary due to the position and condition of the vehicle or vehicles. Might have to gain access under the vehicle or only from the back end. So you safe the vehicle, determine access and egress points, whether it's through the front or through the trunk. Check the vehicle's integrity from outside ground surface. upper roof rail to prevent roof collapse if load is compressed downward and entry made through the side. So I guess goes back to assessing the energies involved in your situation. So we're going in through the back. Remove the trunk lid, the rear deck, and seat back to gain entry into the passenger compartment through the trunk, if necessary. Remove patients located in the rear first prior to the patients in the front. Recline the seats back, mechanically force, spread, or cut the seat backs out of the way. There you go, you've tunneled through the vehicle. So the chapter summary, rescuers should choose the easiest route available to gain access into a vehicle, starting with opening the doors normally. Pry before you pry. Once suitable opening has been made, a medically qualified rescuer should begin patient stabilization during disentanglement procedures. In most cases, the vehicle is removed from the patient and not the reverse. Keep in mind patient and rescuer safety when selecting and applying extrication methods. Are there any questions about that? Okay, we'll take 10 minutes. Shake it off.